This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were on Wednesday. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program. Well, we are in the Easter season. I wish that everyone has a blessed Easter season for the weekend. I will interview with Sophia Fernandez in Quincy, Illinois. Sophia is a graduate student at Iowa State University. She is helping out with farmers in Uganda with their crop. Then I am joining with Owen Roberts from the University of Illinois. We were talking about agriculture communication at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. He is the president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. Jeff Nelly. Jeff is the National Association of Farm Broadcasting in Kentucky. I will ask him about the storms and tornadoes in Kentucky. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold. This week is the planting season progress at 10% from this week in central Illinois because of the weather in central Illinois. Soy Transportation Coalition Mike Steenhoek has weighed on the U.S. built into the United States. However, it is pretty confident in China with ships within the ocean. Mike Steenhoek has called for the tariffs issue is ending with the commodities markets for farmers in the Midwest. Finally, this Easter season and the planting season. Remember that why we celebrated on Easter. That's your rural news for this afternoon. This is your commodities markets update for this afternoon, sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Inc., part of StoneX Financial Services. May corn is up at 3 to 5 cents. July corn is up at 4 to 5 cents. May beans are up at 5 to 10 cents. July beans are up at 6 to 8 cents. Kansas City wheat is up as well. KC May wheat is up at 9 to 6 cents. KC July wheat is up at 4 to 8 cents. Chicago wheat is up. Chicago May wheat is up at 5 to 8 cents. Chicago July wheat is up at 4 to 6 cents. Let's take a look for the livestock markets. June cattle is up at 9 to 10 cents. August cattle is up at 5 to 10 cents. May feeder is up at 3 to 5 cents. July feeder cattle is up at 9 to 4 cents. June hogs is up at 5 to 10 cents. August hogs is up at 4 to 8 cents. Cash cattle markets is down 4 this week at 208. Cash hogs markets are down at 81. 71 for this week in Iowa and Minnesota. This been your commodities markets for this afternoon. We were talking about updating from the agricultural industry in Uganda with Sophia Fernandez in Quincy, Illinois. Sophia was former student at Iowa State University. Welcome to the show, Sophia.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let's discuss about yourself and your experience with the agricultural in Uganda. Could you tell our audience about it?
Yes, so as Caesar was saying, I am a former graduate from Iowa State University. I came to Iowa State back in 2019 for my undergraduate, where I ended up completing a bachelor's degree in global resource systems and agricultural studies with a minor in Spanish. And I'm currently still at Iowa State as I complete a master's degree in agricultural education. So I have done a lot of work in Uganda over my last 6 years here at Iowa State. Starting during my undergraduate program, my first visit to Uganda was in 2022, where I was able to stay there during a service learning experience for 2 months. And during this time, I really got to engage with the community. Iowa State has a non-governmental organization or a nonprofit over in Uganda that has been there since 2004 under the Center for Sustainable Rural Livelihoods. And they have just created such an amazing opportunity for Iowa State and Macquarie, which is a Ugandan university, for both university students to go over and really engage in the community. They've created and implemented so many different livelihood programs, and they now have a beautiful campus for students to stay in. And we were teaching at schools and working in the school gardens because at these schools, they don't have government funded school lunch programs. They have gardens behind these schools that supplement their lunch programs for the students to eat lunch at the schools every day. And for a lot of these kids, that's the only meal that they get every day that they're at school. And so it really makes a huge impact. But they also work in livestock production, crop production, nutrition, health, sanitation, water. They really just touch every stage of the life cycle, and it's really amazing. And I have been to Uganda 3 times since then, which is really incredible. During my graduate program, where I had the opportunity to work and co-create a development workshop called the Next Generation Institute, where we bring young NGO practitioners from around the world to the Iowa State University Uganda program campus, where they get to learn about all of the work that Iowa State has done there, so that they can then take these this new knowledge and bring it back to their own NGOs, so that we can continue to spread the wealth of knowledge and develop the world through agriculture. And I led as the program coordinator for 2 years on this project, and it was just really incredible. And I have absolutely loved every single second that I've gotten to work in Uganda.
What did you decide to go to be in Uganda, Sophia?
So the first time that I went, it was just kind of like a study abroad experience that I applied for, was interviewed for, and ended up going. And I originally was accepted to go back in 2020 over the summer, but obviously because of COVID, the trip was continued to be postponed. And so it was postponed for 2 years due to the pandemic. And so I wasn't able to go until 2022. And even then, at this point, I thought, well, I don't really know, like, if this is still in line with what I want to do. And I'm just so lucky that I still have that opportunity, because it truly changed the trajectory of my career. And I knew that I was interested in agriculture because I kind of grew up in an agriculture family with my mom, but I didn't realize how passionate I was about international development through agriculture. And I'm really lucky that Iowa State has so many different study abroad and service learning opportunities that I was able to apply for and take part of.
Sophia, what is your ultimate goal for the agricultural in Uganda?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, when I first went there, I was with the dean of the agricultural college here at Iowa State, Dean Dan Robeson, and he asked us that same question of like, what do we think that the ultimate goal is for agriculture in Uganda? How do we determine sustainability through this NGO? You know, you go there and you don't know how many years you're going to be there or what it looks like when we have quote unquote succeeded. But I don't think that the ultimate goal is to have Uganda look or feel like the huge agricultural industry that it is here in Iowa or even in the United States. Because in Uganda, they practice something called subsistence farming, which means that each family grows food, they grow their crops, they raise their livestock for their own personal consumption, for their own livelihoods to eat, and anything that they have left over, that's what they then use for income generation. And so, if we can achieve for each family to have enough food to feed themselves and not worry about starving or being food and nutrition insecure throughout the year, then I would consider that a success because there is so much insecurity in Uganda and honestly throughout the whole continent of Africa, and in many other places of the world. So it's really important to get to that spot of them being able to feed themselves as well as having some crops or some livestock left over that they can generate that income for other like supplemental foods if they need medicine because someone got sick, or even something that's super important is paying for school fees so that their children are able to attend school and gain that education, because that further improves their food and nutrition security is with education.
How is the yield in Uganda with their corn before you go out there?
Yeah, the yield of the corn is it's interesting. That's a hard like thing to measure because the metrics are so much different. They grow a lot of different foods like corn, soybeans, millet, cassava, and all of these things are just to feed their own families. They don't have.
What is your final thoughts about the agricultural outlook in central Illinois and Uganda?
I think when thinking about both of these places, I believe that both places can be very successful in their agricultural industries, even though they look completely different. Um, I think obviously Central Illinois is doing very well with their agricultural industry when comparing it to Uganda. And I am so honored to be able to work with Uganda and work with the people in Uganda and work with the Iowa State University Uganda program staff in Uganda, and continue to work towards the problems that need to be addressed instead of approaching it with a you like a United States or a westernized viewpoint of what their agricultural industry should look like. Because if you take what we do in central Illinois or Iowa or anywhere in the United States, you would think that Uganda is just suffering and just not, they aren't even close to where we're at. And there's so much more for them to go. And they should have combines and they should have huge acreages and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But in reality, like we need to look at it and approach it in a way of, okay, what do the local people think is the real issue and how can we address those problems that impact them every single day instead of imposing our own solutions on them without any of their cultural input. And so I just think keeping an open mind and keeping that differing perspective of what agriculture can look like because there's not one right answer for what agriculture and what farming and what livestock production and crop production should look like all around the world because everywhere faces so many different challenges, whether that be climate or resources or labor or different things like that, that really impacts the success of the agricultural industry.
Thanks, Sophia.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
We've been having a conversation with Sophia Fernandez on back roads of Illinois. We are farm broadcasters in central Illinois and the Midwest as well. However, we need some help to communicate with our audience about the commodities markets and agri-news. Now I'm joining with Owen Roberts from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Owen is a professor of the agricultural communications with the University of Illinois. Hey, Owen, how are you?
I'm having a great day, Caesar. Thank you for asking me to be part of your broadcast.
Owen, what is your thoughts on ag news for farmers and ranchers in central Illinois? Some farmers don't know how to respond about the news.
Well, that's understandable. The news is pretty confusing sometimes, maybe more so these days with um, so much news coming at people. I'm glad that you have a broadcast that's going directly to farmers. I think it's very important that farmers have access to the news and commentary about the news that's out there about agriculture. And I think it's also important that consumers hear from farmers about what farmers think is important as far as issues like sustainability and the environment, because farmers have a lot of trust. Farmers are highly trusted by the public. So I think there's an opportunity for both farmers to hear what consumers are concerned about, and for consumers to hear from farmers about the truth or their take on what is the truth about agriculture.
What do you recommend for farmers how to respond to the news about the trade barriers like for right now?
I think farmers need to stay very just like non-farmers. I think everybody needs to go to their most trusted news source and keep a real eye and an ear on the news right now because it changes so fast. And I can appreciate how confusing it is for farmers who are trying to make management decisions based on how the news is changing so much. I think consumers are trying to do the same thing. People who have mortgages, and it's a very confusing time. But I can appreciate in Illinois, especially because Illinois is such a big exporting state, how this would be a distressing time for farmers with so much uncertainty. So I'm encouraging everyone to stay close to their most trusted news source so they can find out the latest occurrences. And certainly in farming and in agriculture, there are some excellent news sources in Illinois and nationwide that will stay on top of the latest developments coming from the state and from federal sources.
Can you tell us about yourself and your Department of Agricultural Communication at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign?
Sure, the agricultural communications unit here in at the University of Illinois in um, Urbana-Champaign. It's one of the oldest in the country, and it's dedicated to three things. We have three platforms. One of them is critical thinking. The other is skill development, and the other is global awareness. And we think our students need to be tuned into all those areas. So we're part of the College of Agriculture, and a lot of the all of the topics that we cover are agriculture related. And what we're doing in agricultural communications is focusing on how to communicate agriculture um, within agriculture, but also outside of agriculture, because we believe there's a big divide between urban and rural um, country cities, the country, farming. We think that all needs to be brought more closely together, and we think communications is one of the ways to do it.
Did you work with Jim Evans for a long time?
Well, Professor Jim Evans will be known to a lot of your listeners as someone who was um, he was one of the mainstays in establishing a solid agricultural communications program in in Champaign. Jim is now at 90. He's almost 93. He's still so sharp. I have coffee with him every couple of weeks, and for about 2 hours, all we do is talk about agricultural communications. He was really a mentor to me and still is. And I'm proud that we have a center that we're opening called the James F. Evans Global Center for Food and Agriculture Communications. And that center is dedicated to doing just what I described about helping to better communicate between rural and urban people.
What is your final thoughts about in the future for agricultural communication?
Well, I think the future for agricultural communications is very bright. I think there's a lot more urban people who want to know what's going on in agriculture. This has been happening over the years, but it was really moved along by COVID when people were looking at their food sources much more closely. And I also think there's a need for agriculture to have access to the best information possible, and that's a matter of communications. So I'd like to think that our students that we're graduating, we have about 40 students in our program over the 4 year span. And I would like to think that those students who are graduating will be helpful and leaders in helping communicate about agriculture and food. So I'm very hopeful for the future.
This is thanks, Owen.
My pleasure, Caesar. Anytime. I'm glad to speak with you.
This is Dr. Roberts from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign on back roads of Illinois. I'm joining with Jeff Nelly. Jeff is the National Association of Farm Broadcasting president from the state of Kentucky. What an honor to have you for today. How are things with the storms and flooding? Tornadoes in Kentucky?
Most of the tornado activity was confined to southern Illinois and southern Indiana, although there were a couple that were in western Kentucky in this most recent round. Owensboro, my hometown, sits in the northwest section of Kentucky. We are just south of Evansville, Indiana. And as you go by the interstate, about an hour and 20 minutes from Illinois. Our area received the silent killer, if you will, heavy inundation of rain, while the tornadic activity was generally north of the Ohio River. Most of western Kentucky received between 10 and 15 inches of rainfall that put us in historic levels with regarding to flooding along some of the major and minor tributaries. In those northwestern counties, we have several thousand acres of farmland that are still underwater as rivers are slowly falling. And now on the opposite side of those areas that are on higher ground, we have field work taking place right now, and there's some planting going on. It's a measure of extremes.
You're in home of bluegrass. Sorry for that.
Bluegrass is more noted for the central and eastern sections of Kentucky, outside of Frankfort, outside of Lexington. But even though they call it bluegrass, it's still green and it still has to be mowed.
What is your top priority for the NAFB for this year, Jeff?
NAFB has an over 80-year heritage of serving farmers. So if you look to the bottom line of things that have to be done, we want to continue to keep up with the news of the day. And certainly this is no short order given the level of change that we're seeing from this new administration, given the very, very tight budget scenario that we're facing in the nation, with the national debt approaching at above $36 trillion. We are still absent a farm bill. And with regard to hunger in the nation, we have more people that are food insecure today than we did during the COVID pandemic. So at one time, NAFB served primarily the farming community, and we still do. But we also recognize that we have a lot bigger audience listening to terrestrial radio today. Many of those are not farmers. And we have a responsibility to keep up with government regulation and proposed legislation, the impact of tariffs, what's moving the market. But we also have a responsibility to share agriculture with the non-farm public. So our tasks are long, and the stories that we have to cover, there's no shortage of those. We're also, in terms of NAFB, so my first priority is to continue the tradition of serving farmers. The second is to carry the agriculture message to the consumer. But then we also have a responsibility of sharing the needs of this industry as we move ahead. And that means keeping NAFB up to date with technology. That means finding resources to support our programming. And that's a big challenge today because the agriculture economy is down, less some segments of the livestock industry that are doing better than what you would say row crops. But overall, farm income is down. And were it not for government supports, you would see farm income well below the curve of what we would find over the past couple of decades. So while the economy is down, that means less advertising. So our companies have to work harder as an association. We have to share our message and try to keep revenue coming into farm broadcasting so that we can still be on the air and serve our role. The second side is embracing some new technologies. While we've largely been about broadcast, and we still are, that is our primary focus, National Association of Farm Broadcasting. We also recognize that when NAFB was born, radio was new and television wasn't going to be born yet. So it's through broadcast that we have made our name. We also recognize today that there are technologies out there, the internet, smartphones, that people are paying attention to. They like their information a la carte, on demand. So our association is working to embrace these new forms of serving an audience, not losing our heritage and broadcast, but also embracing new opportunities to serve an even bigger audience with a lot less limits, quite frankly, on time and on programming.
What happened with the radio stations and the new vehicles in Congress?
The legislation of AM radio in every vehicle um, did not make it into the budget resolution at the end of 2024. That legislation has been reintroduced in this Congress, but like so many things in Washington that need to be done, it's all really tied up in the budget right now. The AM Radio in every vehicle act is looking for a vehicle, a piece of legislation that will be approved that we can tag on to and that would be accepted. It has enough support in the House for a majority vote. It has enough support in the Senate for a majority vote, um, but it hasn't found that that vehicle that can move it across the goal line. We stand in line with E15 legislation to be able to sell that year round, and other pieces of legislation that might move, but they need a major vehicle to attach to. And we just hope that at some point through this year, some of this legislation that has to be approved, a budget reconciliation, some of these other things, that we might be able to see that across the finish line.
How was your experience with the Secretary of Agriculture in Denver for Commodity Classic?
Secretary Rollins is a very intelligent and bright individual. I was able to speak with her the night of the inauguration in Washington. I had the opportunity to interview her on her first public outing when she was at Kentucky at the National Farm Machinery Show and the championship tractor pull down there. We've spoken on the phone a couple of other times, but I didn't have the chance to face with her at Commodity Classic. She was much in demand, and there were several meetings going on. I find the secretary very supportive of her boss, Donald Trump. She was involved in a think tank in his first administration, and now she shares the responsibility of moving the USDA forward. She is concerned about farm revenue and says that this president and says that her department will keep their promise
What is your final thoughts about in the agricultural industry for right now? Because a lot of uncertainty with ag markets.
This is probably one of the most tenuous times that I think we have seen in the history of ag. And when I think about my family culture, my granddad was born in 1898, and he worked on the Mighty Oak Farm on the McLean-Davis County line in Kentucky. They had 400 acres at the turn of the century, and certainly they had obstacles of producing and taking care of the family and the staff that was a part of the farm in that day. Today, we're on a much bigger scale. We're producing more than we ever have before. We are more sustainable than we've ever been before. But there are so many wolves that are around this business, and so many things that are agriculture and others that don't have anything to do with agriculture that are influencing the bottom line of producers. Um, it's just a time, we have seen time in commodity markets that, basically anytime you drove the truck to town, it was a good marketing decision. That's not the case today. Farmers are going to have to really, really watch their marketing plans closely. And that means they need information. So we're there to try to provide that information. But I don't see this easing up less some major political winds that change. I don't see this changing unless we see some significant shifts in weather patterns in either the Southern Hemisphere or here in the U.S. The Black Sea region is coming back on board. This is no longer an industry that you can just watch your state. This is no longer an industry that you can watch your side of the country, Eastern or Western Corn Belt. This is no longer a day that you can just concentrate on the U.S. You have to have an eye and an ear on what's moving global markets, what's moving global politics, because it all factors down to commodities. But when you think of all the things that we have in smartphones and smart cars and smart water and smart coffee makers, we still have to eat. We still have to eat. We still have to have enough calories to take care of the population. And in that, I'm long on agriculture. The Lord has promised to feed his people. The Lord knew that he needed in the garden a caretaker, and he continues to provide us caretakers today, whether they be farmers or whether they be the people in ag retail or in industry that are looking for opportunities. And with that, I see a collective group of people that are committed to seeing that we are fed and to protecting our environment. And with that, despite the headwinds and the challenges, I still believe that we're going to come out ahead and we're going to be successful.
That's true. Don't forget about smart cattle, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last statement, please.
That's true. Don't forget about smart cattle, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, that too. That too.
Thanks, Mr. President. Do you follow baseball and football?
Not so much baseball. I did follow football when I had a son playing at Southern Illinois University, but he has graduated now from the Saluki football team and is employed here back in the area. So I'm probably going to concentrate a little bit more on fishing than I am football as we move a little deeper into the year.
This is the National Association of Farm Broadcasting President Jeff Nelly on back roads of Illinois. Thanks to Sophia Fernandez in Quincy, Illinois, and thanks to Owen Roberts from the University of Illinois. Jeff Nelly on today. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a great day, and you have a blessed Easter week.